Embrace the suck, right?
There it is. See? Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
there it is. See?
Welcome to the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, the Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club, a small nonprofit based in Pittsburgh, PA. Our mission is to create communities of listening around veterans to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. Our program, the Scuttlebutt, was created to highlight the educational element of our mission by discussing recent military headlines and topics to help bridge the civilian-military divide. And joining me today is Marine veteran James Martin. James, how are you today?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us again. And we have two newbies to the Scuttlebutt today. First up, we'll talk to Mr. Tom Stokes, retired 06 Colonel, correct? Full Colonel?
Yes, full bird colonel.
Great. And you had 30 plus years in the PA Army National Guard and Reserves. And Tom, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Okay, again, my name is Tom Stokes, and I live in Shaler Township, Pennsylvania. Currently retired 06, as Sean mentioned. And I engaged in a lot of things right now, a lot of different activities. I have a mental health practice for veterans and their families. And I am the CEO and founder of Operation Strong Mind, a local small nonprofit. And I am a member of another nonprofit called Journey to Normal. And we made a film about female combat veterans that is finished, and we hope to get that picked up pretty soon. Also working on a book. Hopefully we'll get that out some point in the near future, but I have a chapter in a textbook that was just published recently called Combat Social Work. And it's available if anybody cares to purchase it and take a look at it. And it's based on my tour as a mental health officer in Afghanistan. So other than that, enjoy my downtime, what little I have of it. So that's me.
Awesome, Tom. Thanks. And you know what, we'll get a whole bunch of links put up, not only in our live YouTube feed, but we'll also have them up here on the video. So everybody can link to those, the books and to your organizations. Jumping over to Gabriel Beltrez. Did I pronounce that right, Gabriel?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Gabriel, you are a retired Marine Corps of 5+ years. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Yes, I am a retired Marine, Corporal Beltrez, E4. Spent 5+ years in the Marine Corps, got injured, got out. And now I am on my path to kind of reallocating myself in the civilian sector in this new world, if you would say, because it is a different world. Going to school for graphic design after many different degree paths along the way to try to figure out what I wanted to do. And also avid gamer, very avid gamer, trying to hopefully in the future make that a career path as well. Go under the pseudonym Anubis Abada Boopy, have a Facebook, YouTube, Twitch page, all about gaming and all about having fun, because my slogan is, if you're gonna game, make sure it's fun. I mean, if it's not fun, change the way you're doing it.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabriel. And, you know, that brings me, James, our topic this week is actually going to be military gaming, which we will get to later in the program. But Gabriel talking about his gamer tag, I was wondering if you wanted to pitch yours as well.
Mine is Ryu Nights on Facebook, on Twitch, YouTube. Doesn't matter. It's we actually play a lot together. It's almost like a family affair. So actually, it is a family affair. Why am I lying? And we try to come up together. His is if the game is supposed to be fun. If it's not, change the way you're doing it. And I just try to make sure that everybody goes out of their way to be nice to somebody, because you never know how much it's going to mean.
It's true. And my gamer tag is Valhalla 360 across all platforms. What's great is Tom is not a gamer, but he's joining us for the gaming conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about military style gaming. We'll get more into that later in the program. A reminder, I am not a veteran. I am the only non-veteran on the panel today, but I'm going to be attempting to understand more of military style gaming, and I'm glad that you're all joining us. So if you'd be so kind, we ask you to please help us spread the Scuttlebutt by liking, sharing, subscribing, ringing the bell so you can be the first to know whenever our videos come up on live on Mondays. If you want to connect with us, please leave us a comment on YouTube or email me at sean@veteransbreakfastclub.com. Let's dive right into the episode here. First up is our weekly mail call. We had some good ones this week. First, there has been so much response to the Navy changing over the pea coat to a not nearly as good of a coat. Let's just say that. But the first one comes from Dennis McCarthy, Vietnam veteran. He's a sailor and a Seabee. He says, "Hey, nobody asked me if this was okay, which it is not. I had a deal with the Chief of Naval Operations to pass all his decisions by me. I guess it was a 50-year expiration time frame on those courtesies." He says, "My mother-in-law, God bless her 89-year-old soul, laid claim to my peacoat when we moved back to Pittsburgh. At first, I was very proud that she wanted it. Then I saw the stylish improvements she made to it. Leopard fur around the cuffs and the collar. It looks as ugly as the new all-weather parka piece of crap that the Navy is issuing. If I still had that beloved jacket in pristine condition, I could make a small killing on eBay or Amazon. Expletive, Navy. The next thing you know, they'll want to put air conditioners on ships." Have any of you, I know you're none of you are Navy retired, but have any of you tried on the Navy pea coat?
Of course. Absolutely.
So it gets its way around.
It's a freaking cashmere sweater at that point. It's nice. It is nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dennis, for emailing us. Again, anybody who would like to email us, please connect with us. Our last bit of mail call comes from Dave Seaver, former Air Force nurse and a post 9/11 vet. This is in response to our last episode where we were talking about Afghanistan at 19. He says, "I was only able to watch part of the program today, and at one point the mountains of Afghanistan were mentioned. I have attached a picture taken from Bagram Airfield, which gives some idea of just how rugged and high the mountains are there." We'll put up the picture now, but it's a beautiful countryside. James, is that right?
It does have very beautiful countryside to it. It has these nice, beautiful flats, and then when you get into those mountains, they can get rugged and high and very hard to climb. So there was many different sides to Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Gabriel, Tom, did either of you serve in Afghanistan? Did you get a chance to experience sort of the vistas there?
I was there for a year. Yes, I did. I traveled quite a bit. I was in a province called Paktia, which is in eastern Pakistan, up in the mountains, almost say about 7,400 feet up. So yes, I got to see those landscapes that James is talking about, and some of them reminded me of lunar landscapes, actually. Like being on the moon.
I'm going to have to say no. I have not seen the landscape of Afghanistan.
No, not a problem. Okay, so jumping into our next segment, the word or phrase of the week. Last week we did crumb catcher, which James actually said was crumb crusher, which was what the Marines use. Was that right? Crumb crusher, which was your mouth. Ben Wright, one of our VBC board members, he let me know that the crumb catcher was also the cummerbund for the Air Force mess dress uniform. It was referred to as a crumb catcher because the pleats were properly worn with the open end and the pleats up, and they would catch the crumbs. So I thought that was interesting that these words or phrases of the week, sometimes actually between branches, they might actually be different meaning between even the branches. So we go with the one that we find, but Ben had a different take on what that crumb catcher is. So thank you for that, Ben. And the last one is Barney style. I don't know if the three of you had heard of Barney style. Gabriel, you're shaking your head. Can you tell me what Barney style is?
It's how I live my life. If you can't explain something Barney style, you don't actually know it. It's basically explaining something in such a simple form that there is no way it can be misinterpreted, not understood, and it just makes things a lot simpler. It's if you cannot explain something in Barney style to where there's no if, ands, or buts about it, then you don't truly understand something.
I might have to use it later whenever we're describing it. Or Tom, if we talk about any video game that you're like, don't get it, explain it to me Barney style.
Okay.
Now I'll know.
Okay.
Now I'll know what you mean. And moving into our headlines this week, I found some really interesting headlines and some updates on some of the things that we've covered in the last couple episodes of the Scuttlebutt. But first up, what happens when the Joint Chiefs go into quarantine? This comes to us from military.com. After the number 2 admiral in the Coast Guard, who had taken part in a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, tested positive for COVID-19, other top members of the military, including 4-star generals and admirals, began isolation. This included the Joint Chief of Staff Chairman, the Army and Air Force Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Naval Operations, the Commandants of the Marines and the Coast Guard, and the head of Cyber Command, who doubles as the director of the National Security Agency. Now, when I read that, as a civilian, I think, oh my God, all of these top guys are now in isolation. What are we going to do if there's a problem? How do we fix it? James, you told me before the program, that doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. It makes no difference whether they're in office or they're at home. The amount of communication that they have to be able to do what they need to do and coordinate what they need to whenever the time arises, they'll get that information quite proverbially hell or high water.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the hell and the high water. So nothing. What happens when they go to quarantine? That means they just don't come to the office.
Right. So Pentagon press spokesman Jonathan Hoffman said there is no change to the operational readiness of mission capability of the U.S. Armed Forces. And one of the reasons is that the chiefs play no role in the chain of command for military operations. As the uniformed leaders of their services, they help devise and approve plans, budgets, and personnel policies. They also advise the defense secretary and the president on military matters. But ever since the Military Retirement Reform Act passed in 1986, orders to mobilize for wars and fight them go from the president to the secretary of defense to the relevant combatant commanders who supervise multi-service military operations by region or by function. I found that to be really incredible. I thought that the Joint Chiefs had a much bigger hand in when orders were being sent down.
They're more like a catcher for when things go wrong, I feel.
Yeah.
Like if a certain branch or something goes awry, then the Joint Chief of Staffs are kind of put on the spotlight to kind of take the blame for whoever else is in charge.
And
Tom.
I would say Tom would know better than most.
Mm-hmm.
Well, James' comment about I believe you were talking about the electronic capabilities for communication. That's been around for a long time, and it is irrelevant whether you're quarantined or not. That information is going to be transmitted. As I'm well aware, when I was a commander, I had to provide information over briefings electronically that lasted for hours and hours and hours. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way we do business today.
Definitely today as in, we're all recording Scuttlebutt from our respective houses or offices. So I'm sure the Joint Chiefs are sort of doing the same thing. But moving into the next headline, Army recruitment. The active duty Army met its end strength goal this year of 485,000 soldiers, and leadership expects that target number to increase by about 1,500 in 2021. This year's growth included modest increases in the number of women recruits and those of minority backgrounds. I know that recruiting has been very tough and especially tough through COVID. So it's good to see that the Army is getting its end strength goal, especially early. Now it's only October. We have a couple months left. Tom, when you were in, did you find it difficult to recruit? Did you ever have to do any recruiting?
No, I didn't. I wasn't part of recruiting. My job was to keep people in the fight mentally. Mm-hmm. So I was a pretty unique animal in that regard, with the exception of my command time. Mm-hmm. But, my general knowledge of recruiting is that, when Uncle Sam needs bodies, they find ways to make sure that these people are accessed. In fact, for a while, from my understanding, 8 out of 10 people, roughly, or 7 out of 10, were actually screened out and not able to enter. The requirements are fairly rigid to get into the military.
And so for them to meet their end strike goal now it's a pretty great accomplishment.
Yes, that is.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever noticed how the commercials change when they are drawing back the recruitments and when they're trying to up the recruitments?
The commercials for like our live TV programs, like they'll have a quantity amount of commercials more whenever they're trying to get them more recruits.
Oh no, even the style, like when they want to increase their numbers, they play the super proud one where they're in their dress blues and everything is super America, jets flying, American flag flowing, this could be you, career for the future. Those are the commercials that they put out when they want their numbers to go up. As soon as they want to kind of draw back their amounts of people, they're showing more combat, military, exercise, tactics, those things that kind of like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do that. It looks cool, but it could be kind of rough. Those are the commercials that they start pumping out to kind of catch the different mindset where they have the gung-ho people and then they have the, nah, that's not for me people. Literally, they draw that line.
Oh, that's so interesting. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that too, sort of the tactics for recruiting also in our military video game segment coming up. But next headline is an update on our Parris Island, the possibility that the Marines were looking at potentially closing Parris Island and San Diego to open up a new gender integrated base. The commandant, that's how we say it, right? In the military terms, commandant. General David Berger said last week in an interview with Defense One that nothing about the way the Marine Corps' recruit depots are currently organized support a move to fully co-ed training. Both recruit depots are aging, a spokesman for Berger added, which is why the service is studying the option of opening a new boot camp location rather than spending money on construction projects at older bases. Now, as the Marines continue to look at how Parris Island's training can become gender integrated, so far it has trained co-ed companies, but platoons remain segregated by gender. Now, this brought in some action. Representatives Joe Wilson and Ralph Norman, Republican lawmakers from South Carolina, on Friday introduced the Parris Island Protection Act. The measure, if passed, would prohibit the use of federal funds to close or plan the closure of the Marine Corps recruit depot in Parris Island. Now, currently, the service's East Coast training base, Parris Island, they said brings in $700 million a year and employs 6,000 people, which is an incredible amount. So they're trying to institute a bill to say, can't close it, not going to happen. And that's sort of what we had talked about on that episode of Scuttlebutt, is saying, if there's a way for them to keep the history in Parris Island, keep that base there, they should transition it to be a gender integrated base instead of closing it completely. I think that would probably be the vast majority of opinions. Gabriel, being a former Marine, I don't know if you had heard about Parris Island potentially closing, or the idea that they might close it, and your thoughts on that.
I briefly heard it on like a headline or something, but I can't see it happening. Like, there's just so much history, so much everything. Like, I was a part of, Kilo Company when I was there, and all my instructors came from Gulf Company, which was a specialized unit literally made to breed the combat Marines to go directly from boot camp straight into Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, that was their main purpose. So even then, I can see companies going down and like getting repurposed, but as far as the whole base, it wouldn't even make sense. Just on the history alone that it has, it would be more of a landmark, a memorial ground. It would get converted to something like that before it gets closed down completely. I just can't see Parris Island going away.
Right.
That and when you travel around military bases, there are in times like 2008, 2009 with the Great Recession, with COVID and everything that's closed down now, you'd be impressed with how military towns don't lose a drop in the hat. They don't. They're recession proof. As long as the government is still paying, those men and women down there are still getting paid, which means rent's getting paid, mortgages are getting paid, shops are still, outside of the shops having to close, but the business will be right there when they open. And so it's real hard to, lose you don't want to lose that level of finance in that area. It's more than just the base, but like they said, they put that bill out there not because of just the history and everything else, but because of how much money it brings in a year. And it's not exactly the most tourist place on the face of the planet. It's not, but it brings in money and employs its area.
Totally. And last headline here, an update on our shark attack going away and the introduction of the first 100 yards. I thought this was a funny headline coming out of militarytimes.com. They were asking, what is classic one-liners from your drill sergeant? I had a couple listed here from the article. In basic training, a soldier said, my drill sergeant said I was slicker than a snake in motor oil. One mentioned, keep your mouth shut when you're talking to me. Hurry up and eat your food. You can taste it later. Strive to be brighter than a 0-watt light bulb. When we're done with you here, you'll be tougher than a woodpecker's lips. And one of my personal favorites, a soldier at Tim Houston mentioned, we were all running to formation and a private slipped and fell, likely breaking his nose. And he got back up to run. The drill sergeant yelled, you, private, pick up that blood. So everyone seems to have stories of their drill instructor. I don't know if you guys remember an interesting one-liner that kind of pops out in a moment that you would be willing to share.
I think every Marine knows the famous "scream at me."
Yeah, the scream at me. I remember I was in boot camp when I went to boot camp. I wasn't there maybe about a week, and my heavy hat was maybe like 5'2", and he kept on, recruit barn, He's like short, so I'm looking down on him, like I'm looking at my son, and he goes like this to my chest, and I'm like, "Excuse me, why are you rubbing my chest?" He's like, "I'm clearing my landing path." When he jumped up on me and his feet were in my chest, I was like, "Oh, he wasn't joking." I was like, "Okay, so this little guy is serious." Okay. He's not to be played with. All the other one-liners, I can't say out loud. Yeah. Whole thing shut down.
Yeah, same with me. I was enlisted before I got my commission, and I did my basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, the Ozark Mountains. And there's a couple of things. Our head drill sergeant was very eloquent with words. And the opening speech, I can't say things like, James just alluded to, but one of the things he told us, he said that if you don't like the way I run things around here, you can call your congressman in 9 weeks when I let you use the phone. That was one thing. And another thing is that same drill sergeant called out this young soldier at one point during the basic training experience, and he told him, son, you better start walking like you got some kind of purpose in life.
These guys, they definitely, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that you have to be on 24/7 and you have to say something. So they're not going to be tongue-tied. They're just going to start talking.
Their wordsmith was incredible. Just like you would hear something, and sometimes it wasn't even your drill instructor or your drill sergeant. You would hear it from across the way, and you're like, was that what he just said? That was impressive. Like, you have to give kudos to the wordsmithing because you would have never heard it anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely something that sticks in your head the more you hear it. Like one of the ones that I used to hear a lot and you usually saw, somebody getting pushed around was 1 arm's distance. Too close.
1 arm's distance is too close?
Yeah, if you're within 1 arm's distance, you're in the danger zone. So.
We're going to move into our main story, which is military-style video games. And James and I had talked about these and thought it would be a great topic for us to cover. And I know that our listeners, there's probably a lot of non-video game players. Tom, we've said that you don't play video games, but I think that the games that are out there that kids are growing up and playing, a lot of them have military-styled, military themes to them. And then even whenever they go through their service and get out, they might continue playing. And games have come a very long way from a couple decades back with, Pong and things like that, where now we have massive online games of, almost 100 players that can be on two teams and facing each other. But I think that we can sort of narrow this all down into two separate style of camps with military games. And one is going to be sort of an arcade shooter, and one is going to be a military simulation or military sim or milsim. And James, I thought I'd go to you to help me describe what an arcade style shooter is, and maybe some of the titles that fall into that category, and a military sim, and what that is, and maybe some of the games that fall in that category.
So you have your arcade ones are the ones that everybody knows about. You see the commercials about your Call of Duties, your Battlefields and things like that. Basically, it's either first or third person shooter. Halo is a military themed first person shooter,
and I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say first person shooter as opposed to third person shooter, what is the difference between those two things?
First person, you're looking down the side of the weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Third person, I'm looking behind. The camera would be behind me as I move.
Okay.
So I'd be able to see the character versus looking through his eyes.
Okay.
So you have your Call of Duties, your Battlefields. Those are more your arcade styles. Then you have your ARAMs, your arms games that are your simulations. Land, air, and field is another one on Steam that you basically you have a whole entire map. You have this large area of operations, and you're actually placing military units, artilleries, tanks, airplanes, choppers, and the whole entire point is to go over and take an objective through using unit tactics.
Okay.
Those would be more your sims.
And so in an arcade style shooter, Gabriel, maybe you can help me further clarify. Arcade style shooter is sort of run and gun, fast paced. It could be solo or team based. If you die, you're respawning very quickly, and you're just right back into the fight. It's very small maps and a lot of conflict going on at the same time, correct?
Yes, like arcade shooters mostly refer to the type of things that are happening, whether they're more realistic in nature. Like the line between sim and arcade is a little bit skewed in some games. Like Call of Duty is a good example of that, where it has the sim and has the arcade both simultaneously coinciding.
How does it do that, have sim and arcade at the same time?
Okay, so if you think of Call of Duty, immediately you think military mindset. Guns are like actual guns that you can find in the military and stuff like that. So that is like the sim aspect of it. There's also modes in it like hardcore, where it is very military sim-like, where you get shot once, it's over, just like it would be in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have the more arcade side of it, where you have to, defeat your enemy and stuff like that, but you're using like a whole mag to do so, where it doesn't kill them with one bullet. That's more like the arcade aspect. So it's like that line is literally the simulation of whether things are realistic to the point of real life, and where they're realistic to the point of, okay, I can see that happening.
Okay. And a military, and to go dive deeper into sort of military sims, I've seen some things like you are picking everything down to the color of your uniform, The gun is actually, it will be based on a real style military weapon, but it will actually have full parts to it that these real guns do have in real life. You're selecting pieces to make the gun better, whereas in maybe Call of Duty, you don't necessarily have that level of detail. You get, we'd say your M17, and that's what you get. And you can maybe add an attachment to it, like a grenade launcher. But military sims, you're picking very fine detailed things. And it, if you shoot someone, usually one hit will kill them.
Yes, that's more like so the military sims, I think, is separated into two things. There's like the generic military sim, and then there's the tactical military sim. So
Okay.
like I said, military sim, you have Call of Duty where you play the hardcore mode and it's one shot, one kill, and you move on. You have very limited attachments you can do to the weapons to make it, better or what have you. But the skill of the person is the skill of the person. Now you switch gears and go into a game like Rainbow Six Siege and stuff like that. And now you're getting more of the realism that it is to go into combat and to use these weapons in an actual tactical setting where you're trying to set up, you're trying to communicate, you can burst through walls, like use your weapons to actually, mow a wall down to be able to create a different avenue of approach where your flashbangs, do certain things, your grenades work a certain way, your bullets actually on impact do the damage that it would in real life. Like that is more of a military simulation. And you have that not just with like boots on the ground, you have that with actual like Ace Combat is another good
A flight
military-esque, and it's a flight simulator where you're using fighter pilots and stuff like that. And the controls are fairly the same when you put them in perspective with an actual fighter pilot. If you guys watching ever get a chance, look up Ace Combat Pilot gameplay and look up an actual fighter jet like a V-22 flying around doing their stuff. It's pretty spot on.
Very interesting. So, so we wanted to sort of define those two things, because even in military sims, you might have a squad of, let's say, 4 players that their objective is to take a flag. And in a military sim, they might have these players, each playing at their own separate computers. They might have comms to each other, and they might be following very specific military style. What would you call that, James? Sort of
Call-outs?
Their call-outs?
Call-outs and call signs, the orders?
Yeah, call signs, orders. Their protocol for being able to clear a room, which part of the room that they have to go into. Whereas maybe an arcade shooter, you might just, everybody rushes in at once and guns blazing and try to take your objective. Mm-hmm. And this sort of speaks to the idea of just the realism of the games now. The graphics are only getting better, as you start to see the new consoles start to come out, Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5. James is ready for those. The graphics engines on these are very realistic. And we want to go into more about what these games are and this idea of education versus entertainment. And let's just take Call of Duty specifically. Obviously this is a form of entertainment. We're going to get anybody sitting down to play a video game is looking for maybe sort of an escape from reality in a way. But let's also ask the question about educational. How educational is a game like Call of Duty?
It depends on who you play with. Between us two, because we play it often, mm-hmm. A lot of the tactics that so Tom doesn't play games, but he's served. So when I look at him and say, hey, we're going into this house, we're going to go in the front door, up to the left, we're going to take the stairs, we're going to clear up the room and everything, and clear up the upstairs, set up a perimeter in the upstairs looking out the house. He understood what I was saying. Mm-hmm. We use that same tactic in a video game. We've done, hey, look, there's a house up here, up to your 2 o'clock, up on the hill, 250 to your northwest. Hey, there's a shooter up there. We spotted him. Making those same call outs that where kids are sitting here playing it and they're using it as entertainment, we have been able to use it for training. So this way you can better locate. So this way you can make better call outs. If I look at you and say, hey, there's a house 10 feet over there and there's 15 houses. But when I say, hey, top floor, white house, side window, direction 180, now you know where you're looking. And that level of understanding, where we've always had to do it during field ops and things like that. Now, when we go back to our barracks room, our house, with our friends that were playing these games, those same tactics still apply.
Right. There was a very interesting a Vice.com article by Stephen Messner. He quoted the leader of a team that he trained with. This is a veteran who plays military-style video games, and this one specifically called Squad. He was quoted as saying, these real-world skills that we have, for the most part, can't be integrated into society or into a normal job. We have all this knowledge and skill, and we like it, and we would like to continue to use it. So we just put the skill sets we learned into the game. And that sort of speaks to what you were saying, James, about they transition out of the military and have all of this knowledge of like tactics, and you can't use that in society. So where do you use it? You can get into a military sim like Squad and work with other veterans, and everybody's speaking the same military language, the same jargon, and can understand military tactics. And Tom, I would like to ask you, because you work with a lot of transitioning soldiers, am I correct?
Yes, I do.
And have any of them talked about video games that they play, or have anyone talked about like, well, I sort of take a break from reality and can dive into a Call of Duty or whatever, and that's sort of how I can relax, or that's a way that I can use these skill sets that I've learned and be able to play with them?
No, I have to say I have not had anybody mention anything. Sorry to say, because of the topic. Playing video games, either for relaxation or as a way to transition. But I can hear, some things that James is talking about, and my impression is that there is a transference of a culture and a language that's common to those of us in the military that can be integrated into that video gaming experience. And when I work with veterans, we work a lot with the losses that we go through when we try to function in this civilian society that doesn't know us, because there's a new us, obviously, from our military experience. And we lose identity, we lose purpose, we lose language, we lose culture. So to try to recapture that in this form, I think that's what I hear James saying is it can be a very good thing for people to recapture some of it anyway.
That and it's really nice whenever you recapture it, as you said, you realize you're not by yourself. You start to gain that brotherhood with maybe somebody from another branch or anything. It doesn't really matter, because our language is the same. We know we have the same shared experiences, because at 40, at 30, depending on how old you are, depending on your deployments, my life experience is not the same as the average 40-year-old. And so we don't have those same conversations and things like that. But no matter the age frame between the three of us in the military that are sitting here, when we start speaking like this, there's that common bond. And you can find that in that video game, and it helps.
Gabriel, has that been your experience?
More, very, very much so. Video games for me, it's not just, and Tom can probably elaborate this, when you were helping people get combat ready and stuff like that, and you were in charge of people, it's a mindset, it's a difference of being when you're in a combat setting or in a military setting, period. You talk different, you walk different, you interact differently. And then now as a civilian, that's all taken away. But with video games, we can kind of get put back in those shoes, even if temporarily, kind of give us a sense of home, a sense of welcoming, a sense of being, where we can feel like, okay, I'm connected with you and I don't even know you. I just learned your gamer tag. I don't even know your actual name, but that's all I need, because we have the same basis, the same mindset, the same history, though it might, be exaggerated on different lines, but we have that same bond that we can use to kind of correlate our lives to one another.
Now, that brings me to an interesting question is, because you find this familiarity in playing a game, how do you feel about the non-veterans who are playing? Do you see them as what the gamers would call noobs? Is a noob is a new person to a game, doesn't understand anything about it? Is there a different feeling to that sort of those types of people that play video games?
I wouldn't say it's a different type of feeling. It's more, it's just the bond isn't there.
Okay.
You have a difference when you're playing with a veteran and they say like, moving left, pieing right, building left side, top floor, da, da, da. Like there's just a jargon. The communication is completely different. When you play with another person, they just say, oh, well, there's a body over here 200 meters away, stuff like that. It's just a difference in communication. And it's not anything bad, honestly. It really isn't anything bad, but it's just you can tell who is military, even in the way they play. You don't have to say anything. Like, let's give an example of a doorway. Person that has military experience is not going to just burst through the door like somebody that doesn't have military experience. The person that has military experience is going to open the door, start from one end of the door, and pie their way around to the other side of the door to make sure the door is clear. That's just something we were trained and ingrained in us. Now, a person that doesn't have that military experience is going to literally run straight through the door, do some kind of slide jump maneuver or whatever, and get you, which is fine. In that game, in that setting, it's completely good. But you're not going to see a veteran that, has that tactic mindset do that off the top of their brain. It's just something different in our culture and the way we do things.
Do you find that playing a military style video game like Call of Duty and playing it with the military mindset of understanding how to approach a doorway, do you find that to be a strong tactic for success in the game? Or do you see that the running and gunning has its own positives?
It has its place. I wouldn't say it leads to success or doesn't lead to success, because every game itself, being, like I said, I'm an avid gamer. Every game has their mechanic and their tactility to be able to play to optimal potential. But when it comes to that military mindset, it makes operations and maneuvers a lot simpler, because where I would have to tell you, being a non-military person, hey, go over to the right and see if you can get an angle on them. I don't need to tell that to a military person. I'm already shooting down the lane, and this person already knows I have to flank right to make sure I can get this person. So that's where that military mindset and that cohesion comes into play. It's more of a nonverbal, already known type of thing.
It's very interesting, because I in setting up for this conversation, I didn't even think about the idea of the familiarity of it between veteran gamers. That I've seen a couple websites of veteran gaming communities that all stick together, and it's like, hey, we all play squad together, we all play Battlefield together. I could see why that would be. That vernacular is similar across the board. I'm the guy that just runs into the building in the game because I'm just playing. But what's interesting is that, I would say in the game you have a death count and a kill count. And mine is usually way skewed in the death count because I'm just running around just trying to find targets. But what I also find interesting about that is the fact that in a video game, if you like Call of Duty, you die a lot, you respawn a lot. Does that cheapen the idea of death? That, we talk about it being a military simulation, and got kids growing up learning about the military or style tactics through these games. And if they're just running in and they have they die 30 times in a match, are they learning the wrong lesson if they were then to say, well, yeah, I want to join the military because it seems pretty cool?
I don't think I don't know. There's a lot that goes on with that. There's going to always be that person that thinks the military is like a video game, like a Call of Duty video game where, oh, I messed up, no consequences. But once you start going through that training, you realize that is not the case. And that's where the separation begins. So there's just a different aspect to when a person plays a video game and thinks the military is cool, and then when the person has been in the military and sees the video game. So us being veterans and been in that aspect and now going into video games, we see that as a relief, you know, like, okay, things are less serious. I can, you know, do the things that I wanted to do and still be relaxed while doing so, knowing that I can come back, I can do stuff, you know. It kind of puts that in a more mentally safe and secure location for us versus the person that hasn't had that military experience. They're kind of just doing it because that's the game logic that they have, not so much this is the military knowledge that I have.
And Tom could even speak to that, to the point of whenever he had to train his troops, of how many times did you have the young kids thinking they knew what they were doing, and then all of a sudden we hand you sesame rounds, the little paint rounds. If you have a story behind that, those are always funny to me. There's nothing I love more than that 18-year-old kid that's been playing video games like, I can handle this, and everybody's going, all right.
Well, I can relate some of that to people learning how to use their M16 or M4 on the firing range. It was always better if you didn't come in thinking you knew how to handle a weapon, because you had some bad habits that had to be undone. And you're going to fire that weapon military style, the way we want you to fire it, not how you used to hunt on your Uncle George's property.
Yeah, because I think part of the military style video games and part of the worry about them is that they glorify war. You know, everybody wants to play the new Call of Duty. Everybody wants to play a new Battlefield. I want to blow up a wall. I want to, you know, run and gun and get a high kill count. And I want to get medals. And that's, you know, that's how I advance in level. That's how I win the game, quote unquote. Is there a feeling, and even Tom, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm sure you've you know, you understand the idea of shooter games. Do they glorify war a bit too much?
Well, you know, I'd like to back up for a minute before I answer that, but what I'm hearing in terms of this discussion is behind a lot of the video gaming is what happens in the military in terms of communication. It's at a very high level in the military that doesn't necessarily exist in the civilian community. And we have an ability to tune into each other. And underlying that is this notion of trust. And that's very, very, very big in the military. And I can see that going on here with video games. You know, when Gabriel's describing the techniques and procedures that are used that are different between military members and civilians. But so I wanted to mention that. But in terms of glorifying war, we've had decades and decades and decades of movies made that glorify war. You can think of some, going all the way back to World War II. And actually, VFW magazine put out a nice series a few years ago about the film industry. And during the films that were made during World War II, I think there were 300 of them, something like that, between 41 and 45. And the majority of them did fall along those lines, glorifying war, the heroes, and glossing over the realities of war for the most part. And I think that the video games are just a more graphic representation of that same idea.
Totally. To speak to that point, the raid that killed Osama bin Laden, you were able to play that in a video game a couple weeks after that actual raid happened. They loaded that up as a simulation into a video game, and you were able to play as a Navy SEAL in the raid. So it's different than watching Zero Dark 30, where you sort of get a background. The last quarter of the movie is the raid. You're understanding how they were going through it. Now you're actually playing it. And scaling the wall or taking the doorway or the stairs. I think it's a different level of propaganda. We love it as entertainment, but there's also this level of propaganda a part of it, in also the sense that the Army is now using video games as a recruiting tool. They have an esports team, esports being the professional video game players that play in tournaments and the like around the country. And so if you are going to release Call of Duty and a kid is going to play it from, let's say, at the young age of 8 or even 12 up through their teen years, I think that they would be interested in combat in some way. The Army saw how many people are playing games, and they said, well, let's create an esports team, and then we can get the word out about how you can come do that in real life. So there's that sort of level of where this has gotten to as well. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but strictly the fact that, in today's world, we use video games to market to people.
But we also use them to train. Some of those people, you'd be impressed how much that hand-eye with the controller matters, because those same kids that are playing Ace Combat at home and learning how to use a Thrustmaster now are the same ones flying drones 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Same principle applies. Same ones who are playing all those little racing car games and that on their phones are those same ones who are going to use mobile bomb devices or something on tracks and wheels. Whole classes about that. Drone operations. It all crosses over. It's just, how do you use it? What's your purpose behind it? Yeah. If it's strictly for entertainment, then it is what it is. But we were using VR headsets in the military. Mm-hmm. So this way you can practice and experience, put on headsets, so this way you didn't hear the noise, and you're starting to make the motions and learning how to shoot. Whenever it was if it was too cold, too wet to go out to shoot, we had the Ismit, where you go inside. They had the rifles on the correct weight on airsoft, learning how to shoot, practicing at all. It's all in how you use it.
So adding on to what he just said, I think that is the baseline for these military video games in our society today. It depends on the mindset going into it. Yes, there are people that think that it's, inciting violence and all that stuff. And I personally believe that those are the same people that don't really understand the global privilege that it is to live in the United States. Because think about it, through history, the only war that was fought here was what? The Civil War. And when the British came originally, that's it. After that, we've kind of made it our mission to make sure any wars are fought on foreign soil so that our area here is good and contained. Mm-hmm. With that being in mind, these video games prepare you for when that is not the case. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So these kids that are in here, learning, oh, I know what an M16 is. I know what a SCAR is. I know what a M203 is. Yeah, they have that knowledge, and right now it seems like useless knowledge, but worst case scenario, global catastrophe and anarchy happens, these same kids are going to have that basis, that knowledge to react. They're going to have that basis and knowledge that, okay, I know enough to have a baseline to try to do something versus I am completely lost in the sauce. I have no idea what to do. What is a gun? So I know that it sounds scary, and like Red Dawn has been remade probably like 3-4 times already to give us that kind of aspect in our mind, like it could happen. Mm-hmm. And I think video games kind of set the precedence that if it does, we got your education online.
There's so much more to dive into with this. I'd love to do a part 2 of video games, military style video games, as I'd like to talk about sort of the cultural insensitivities about video games, in the sense that they seem to be all Western culturally based. It's usually we're gonna kill either Russians or Nazis or terrorists. It's very interesting if you start to take a look at each of the games, who the enemies are that you're going after. And I think those are all and we brought up a lot of really interesting sort of side topics that I wasn't expecting. The idea of trust and communication and familiarity and the feeling of safety whenever you're playing a game as a veteran. That it's a familiar place. You can trust and engage in your teammates in a familiar dialogue, but also feel safe playing the game. I think these are all really incredible topics and something I think we should definitely, James, I'd love to have you back, Gabriel, Tom, to continue this particular discussion. It feels like there's a lot here a lot more to dive into. But for the sake of time and our audience, I'd like to move on to our Scuttlebutt round. We usually spin a wheel. It's a digital wheel, but I'm going to spin it anyway. So spin the wheel. And if Gabriel, if you're the one that has a Scuttlebutt for us, please let us know.
I'm not sure.
That's going to be our soundbite. But I think a good Scuttlebutt, and one thing I'd like you to elaborate on, because I feel like it's a good thing to have, is that playing video games your motto. I wanted to go back to that as well, because if you're going to play Call of Duty, if you're going to play Ace Combat, if you're going to play Mario Brothers or whatever, you should enjoy doing it as opposed to like being angry at a game that you're playing, right?
By all means. Okay, so like I said, this is my motto, so there's plenty enough to say here. One thing you have to understand, right? There is a separation between competitive and recreational video gaming, and that's completely fine. Now, when you dive into these aspects of video game, because me and James get into this all the time when we're playing video games, depending on the aspect, because there's just a different mindset when you get deep into the nitty-gritty about video games. But the bottom line is that you should never let anything, not even video games, affect your psychological health. You shouldn't have anything that takes you to a point where you're either going to cause harm or be harmful. You know what I'm saying? So if you ever get to that point, just realize in the end, it's a game. There's a reset button. You can start all over. You can choose who you play with. You can choose to play something completely different. You can turn it off and go do something else. Gaming is gaming, and it's supposed to be fun. That's the core of it and why it was created. So if gaming is not fun, you do need to change the way you're doing it. And that doesn't mean turn it off, throw away your Xbox, never play it again. That just means, okay, I played this Call of Duty match and my M16 is not working for me and I'm getting really frustrated and want to throw my controller. Let me do something fun. I'm going to put a riot shield and only use grenades. I guarantee you, when you start doing that, your whole tone is going to change. Yeah, your star probably going to die exactly the same amount, but your whole mindset has now shifted. You're going from, now I need to be the top killer, to let's see how many people I can stick with a grenade and just run around with a riot shield so they can't shoot me back. Now you have changed your realm of mindset. You have changed what you're trying to achieve, and now you're in a healthier space where you can actually enjoy what you're doing.
Totally. Thank you for that. And Tom, I'll come to you next for Scuttlebutt.
I don't know that I really have one, but I want to thank Gabriel for giving me a whole new perspective on how to view my fantasy football playing, which could be another topic. A fair number of veterans are fantasy footballers, and that can lead to some frustration and consternation at times.
I hear you on that, definitely. Especially if there's money involved and your star player just blew his knee out for the season.
Yeah. Or why would I ever have thought to pick that player?
Right.
Julio.
You do it for the fun of it and maybe some side cheese, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
James, Scuttlebutt?
Scuttlebutt, mine came from militaries.com. A couple days ago, they had an article where they basically collaborated with the VA about the DOD and the Veteran Affairs using adaptive sports as part of the healing process, alluding to the U.S. Paralympic team or the Invictus Games, and had a whole entire thing of the benefits of why you should do it. That right there between me and Gabe, it actually plays very close to our hearts. We actually shot a lot of archery, cycling, recumbent, and things like that. So the benefits of adaptive sports are there, and the VA wants to let people know that they are currently either doing it to some level and extent, or trying to open up small offices and contingents where they introduce adaptive sports. So if you're into that sort of thing, contact your local VA, ask them about what they have going on, because it can be extremely helpful.
Does that include video games too, do you think? Like, I mean, it's an activity?
They talked about it, but we don't know yet.
We'll see.
To add to Jake's thing, this is going to be a little bit of a heart to heart because, like I said, like he said, the adaptive sports really did impact our lives in a great way. And I'm talking to you veterans out there that are, thinking you're inadequate because of your injuries or your mental disabilities. Look at my face right now and understand you are a whole person. You are still worthy of everything. You understand? Adaptive sports will put that into perspective. You're going to be able to do the same sports you used to do, be able to make the same maneuvers, but now in a whole new different light that you didn't even know existed. You're going to be introduced into a world that you had zero idea was around. And it's going to be something that can change you and be infectious in a good way. Like, it's going to reignite that flame again. So if you haven't done so, go ahead and check it out. You'd be surprised how more challenging, I would say, more challenging is wheelchair basketball versus regular basketball.
Oh,
James, have you tried that?
he's good at it. I don't have it in me. Where he's good at wheelchair basketball, I'll definitely shoot a bow and arrow with him any day of the week.
Gabriel, you sold me on it. Definitely. Mine's a bit obscure. My Scuttlebutt in the VBC live in a program we have earlier in the week, we were talking about mid-air refueling. And anybody here, I'd love to hear a date of when you think the first air refueling happened. Any year. We'll go James first.
1930s.
1930s, Gabriel?
I would have said like 1940s, somewhere around there.
Tom?
1950s.
This article coming from National Museum .af.mil on October 5th, 1922, Lieutenants John A. McReady and Oakley G. Kelly set a world endurance record of 35 hours, 18 minutes, 30 seconds in their Fokker T-2 airplane, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, over San Diego, California, for which they received the Mackay Trophy. Had they not run low on gasoline, they could have remained in the air until personal fatigue or mechanical difficulty with the T-2 forced them to land. To eliminate the fuel limitation problem, the flyers at Rockwell Field, San Diego, developed a system for the mid-air refueling between DH-4B airplanes. The first successful aerial refueling took place on June 27th, 1923, when a DH-4B carrying Lieutenants Virgil Hine and Frank W. Seifert passed gasoline through a hose to another DH-4B flying beneath it, carrying Lieutenants Lowell H. Smith and John P. Richter. Would not have guessed 1923 at all.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
No.
I was out.
No.
That's impressive. Especially
Yeah.
at that time. That's just like, if for those who are watching that don't know how fueling an airplane mid-flight works, think about high-fiving somebody at 500 miles per hour midair, but your hand is the size of a needle. Like, that's basically it. It's a great feat.
And there was a recent accident of an F-35 that collided with the mid-air refueling. Everybody was safe in the end, but the F-35 crashed. The refueling plane went down, landed in a field. It's still incredibly dangerous, and the fact that they were able to do this in 1923 is unbelievable, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Tom, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you wearing your Embrace the Suck hat. That was our phrase of the week several weeks ago. That's awesome. Gabriel, I really appreciate you joining us as well. we'd love to have you both back on for not just a further conversation about military-style video games, but for anything really. And for our audience, if you're just listening on audio through our website, you can also check out the actual video where we'll have different links posted within the video, potentially some video about the video games that we spoke about, so you can sort of see them in action. And also make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe, ring the bell so you know whenever our episodes come out. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you guys all next week.